Hello and welcome to another episode of Highland Coffee Talk Show. I'm your host Nawan, and today we have with us Matthew Schmookler. He's a practitioner and a teacher in Tibetan medicine under Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche with the Shangshung Institute. I will let him talk to us about it a little more and we can get into the conversation more.
Awesome.
Hello Matthew.
Thank you, thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so like you said, I've been practicing Tibetan medicine now for about 10 years or so. I graduated from the Shangshung Institute School of Tibetan Medicine, which is located in, the American branch is located in Conway, Massachusetts. And actually was founded back in the 80s in Italy, so there was, the first branch was in Italy and inaugurated also by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And there's several branches around the world. We have a branch in Russia, we have a branch in Austria, now also in Tenerife, in Spain, the island of Tenerife. I was in the first cohort of students to graduate from the 4-year curriculum taught by Dr. Punsok Wangbola. She started the school to really try to have a more serious program in Tibetan medicine, because what they saw happening was that there was these workshops or 2-week intensives, and then people would leave and act like they already knew how to practice Tibetan medicine.
Absolutely.
Which, unfortunate, of course, we know that a lot of times, Tibetan culture or other cultures are appropriated and then misused, and they're just using this title to make money. And so she saw this trend early on, and under Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche's direction, she started this full-on 4-year program.
Can I ask you, how did you get introduced to Shangshung, and what was your motivation behind it?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I started. The story goes that actually in my earlier spiritual path, I was following a Native American ceremonial leader, and I was doing this peace walks on the West Coast with him.
What's a peace walk?
It's like an activist. It's kind of an action, a very peaceful action against war, basically, and to promote peace. And I was walking there was a Nepalese Buddhist monk who was with us and chanting Om Mani Padme Hum all along the way. And my teacher was just really into this, doing these peace walks, and he had a little group of us. We were kind of nomadic, sort of hippie kids at the time. And we were going up the coast, and we stopped here in Berkeley, and my dad at the time said to me, "Hey, you want to go to a Tibetan yoga class?" And I was like, I really felt I'm not a big fan of going to classes at that time. At least I was a little bit hesitant in general, but something really called me to go. I had no idea what Tibetan yoga was, so I felt really called. And so I went to my teacher. I remember saying, "Yeah, you should go. Maybe you'll learn something you could teach us along the way," which ended up being kind of a prophecy for me, because I ended up becoming a teacher of this yoga too. So anyways, I went to this Tibetan yoga class. It was here in Berkeley at Dondra Bling at the Dzogchen Community Center. And from that point on, I just got really called to the Dzogchen teachings of Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche. This was one of the practices in his community, and I ended up going out to Margarita Island to a retreat to continue training in the yoga, and also to go to one of his retreats that he was offering. And he was giving a Kala Chakra teaching, actually. And when I was there, I met his niece, Dr. Punsok Wangbola, who was getting ready to start the program on the East Coast. And when I heard about it, I was a little intimidated. She was saying a 4-year program, full time. But when I heard her teach on Tibetan medicine, I just really felt, wow, this is a complete holistic health system, still intact, very strong root and really unified so many of the things I had learned about in the holistic health world. So it just brought it all together.
Matt, can I ask you, what was your background before that? So
yeah, so actually that's a good point. So I was never a great student, to be honest. I was I was always clever, but good at I was never drawn to academia very much. But I had kind of been in and out of college and following my teacher around and being more nomadic for a while. And then my mom introduced me to this bachelor degree that was called the University for Integrative Learning, where I could use my life experiences as my curriculum. And so in that process, I realized that all the things I had been interested in my own self sort of driven path were related to healing.
Sure.
So I was finishing right at that time, a bachelor degree in what I called integrative healing. Like I wrote a thesis on this. And in that process, I had studied massage therapy and some other modalities. So I was kind of going in the direction of health and healing. And that's when I met Dr. Punsak. It was basically perfect timing for me.
If we were to compare what you're involved in with Western medicine,
yes,
how would you say? What are the benefits of either, and why do you choose to be in Shangsheng and Eastern medicine?
Yeah, that's a great question and something that comes up often. And it's of course a little bit of a tricky question because we always want to, we don't want to overstate anything. But basically, in a nutshell, so Western medicine, from my point of view at least, I haven't studied a lot of Western medicine. We study a little bit, of course. Its real strong points are in infection control. A lot of the modern public health and developments in health have been around, really suppressing infectious disease, and also for the tech. Yeah.
Well, can I just reframe my question, because
sure.
I want to. It's a big context,
it
and
is.
I'm not trying to.
Yeah.
Because one could argue that there's a lot of benefits to Western medicine as well, right? If you are with cancer or when it's a specific treatment, like I need surgery for something, my appendicitis or something. It's a more direct. So along those lines, so where does Tibetan medicine and your healing modalities fit in? Is it a supplemental, or is it's primary? Like, how would you break that down?
Yeah. So I would break it down in two ways. One is that it's very complementary. So the best part of medicine in general is collaboration.
Absolutely.
Patients don't care what tradition something is from. They just want to feel healthy and better, because health is the base for happiness.
Yes.
And in that, so within the strong sort of intrusive or invasive therapies of traditional of modern medicine, which are great with surgery and also really strong cancer treatments and so forth, Tibetan medicine can play a role in helping to balance the physical body that's getting this very strong therapy. So it can bring strength back and help just keep everything more healthy and balanced and calm during something like that, during that process. The other thing that is really strong about Tibetan medicine, maybe not so strong about Western medicine, is prevention.
Okay.
So, now there's a lot of growing nutritional evidence that's pointing back at what a lot of Eastern medicine has been saying for centuries, which is about how to maintain your health through your diet and lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And it's just going more and more in this way. And unfortunately, many Western doctors are not given much training in nutrition at all. I think that trend is starting to change a little bit, but this is the basis of Tibetan medicine, is diet and lifestyle. This is the first treatments we use, and this is how we try to educate people to maintain their health before they have a problem.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm also there's this big push, just a little for intermittent fasting and paleo,
Yes.
and keto, and even I
Yes.
practice it to an extent.
Right.
But I want to bring this conversation back to like the metaphysical aspect of it,
Okay.
because it sounds there is a big metaphysical component
Yes.
in Tibetan medicine, and of course there's mysticism involved. So just give me your thoughts
Sure.
on the importance of that.
So my teacher told us right away, Tibetan medicine can be seen as a purely scientific tradition. It can be seen purely as a spiritual tradition, or it can be seen both, and or applied with both. And of course, we consider the strongest is when you combine the two. But for those who want to see it just as a science, that's okay. They can also just follow the science, because we have a 5 elements theory, and we use that theory in all of our treatment and our diagnosis and our theory, our basic like understanding of anatomy and physiology. But when there's also the root, because there's such a strong Buddhist philosophy and tradition in Tibet, they were sort of somehow perfectly combined with the understanding of our anatomy and physiology and all of those things. So the very basic way that we bring that knowledge, and this can be also found in the modern trends, is that the root of all disease is considered to be ignorance in Tibetan medicine. We say ma rigpa.
More like even Buddhism, I would argue, but
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And so now we see this trend in mindfulness, all over the place in the wellness world, that mindfulness is an important aspect of being healthy and well in our lives. And wellness is a very broad thing, and we tend to, in the modern world, compartmentalize the mental health and the physical health, but in Tibetan medicine, they're already combined since the beginning. And from ma rigpa, or ignorance, we say that ma rigpa gives rise to the 3 poisons. So the 3 poisons are considered the distant causes of illness. And then these 3 poisons give rise to what we call the nyepasum, the 3 like harmers. And these 3 are the basis of the 5 elements in our body. So lung chipa peken, this is like wind, fire or bile in some translations, and peken is earth and water element. And this is the physiological functions of our body, the active elements working in our body. So in that sense, this is the very basic root theory of what gives rise to our condition, and how we can understand how to treat the causes of illness.
Okay. So it's just I see a lot of like wellness, and there's more and more people in the wellness community are tapping into Eastern modalities.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it might sound a little critical, or maybe I'm skeptical, but
Sure.
I truly believe that surface knowledge can't be that great. You have to have delved in it deep, and then you can
Absolutely.
practice it. You have. So
Sure.
how would you address someone who just only knows this discipline on a
Sure.
superficial level? And is that helpful, or should they be more engaged in it?
That's a great question, and an ongoing, there's kind of discussion, I guess. On one level, what I would say is that when you learn a system in its true unchanged form, like Tibetan medicine, especially in general, this was the primary healthcare of the Tibetan people for centuries. And it's highly developed, it's very sophisticated, and yes, you can look superficially and learn a little bit, but to truly be able to treat people with it, for example, you need to spend a minimum of 4 years full-time studying. And the wellness world in general is becoming quite confusing. You say paleo, keto, intermittent fasting. Some of these things have roots with Eastern medicine,
Absolutely.
right? But the problem is it's taken out of context. And so it's very confusing when you learn all these different ways, and everybody says, this is the right way, this is the right way, this is the right way. And what I found is that when you have a system like Tibetan medicine, you can really make sense of all of the systems out there. You can understand which application, which diet, which lifestyle is important for you as an individual. And at the Shangsheng Institute now, what we're doing to address these different levels of interest is to offer programs that we feel are suited for the correct audience. So right now we're developing a self-care program.
Sure.
It's like a 4 to 6 day program, and this gives people the tools in that short amount of time to apply it to themselves, and also to make sense of the greater wellness world that's really developing, because it's quite confusing. And the beauty of Tibetan medicine and other Eastern medicines is that it's individualized approach. How to understand what's good for you now, today, you know, according to the season, your age, your constitution, any underlying conditions, and so forth. How do you make sense of all these different health things you learn for you? So that's one way it can be addressed, is by getting like the right information for the right application. So then we're developing programs that are a little bit longer, like 2 years long, that are health coaching programs, so that people can understand how much training it takes in order to know how to help somebody else with their diet and lifestyle simply. Nothing more, no major treatments or anything like this.
So Matthew, can I ask you, what do you think makes a good Tibetan medicine practitioner? And also, if you had to convince not convince, but if there was a skeptical person or a non-believer in this Eastern approach, what would you sell them on?
What my teacher told me, Dr. Punsok Wangmala, is that that a truly good doctor is one that has really pure compassion for their patients. So if your motivation is compassion and love and really trying to benefit and help people, your medicine will work better than the person next to you. And they say this because, and this is where, of course, going back to your original question about metaphysical, is that through cultivating the inner compassion, bodhicitta mind, you can really help people more with medicine. Absolutely. And you can understand this, those who might be skeptical of that, through the understanding of the placebo effect, because we know that there's a placebo effect, and a lot of that, and I don't have all the studies in front of me, has to do with the confidence the patient has in the doctor.
Sure.
So if there's this matching that the doctor truly cares for the patient can feel that, and then they really give themselves to the treatment, and this empowers also the treatment that's being given. That's not to say that they can give anything. You know, we have extremely highly measured, sophisticated herbal formulation, for example, in Tibetan medicine. Everything has to match perfectly. So but when you have them combined, it's more effective.
So Matthew, can you just, there's Shangshung borrows a lot from shamanism and Bon. So could you talk a little bit about that?
So Shangshung was the original pre-Buddhist kingdom of Tibet. And Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche is considered one of, if not the biggest expert on the early Tibetan history. He really published one of the most groundbreaking books for, I believe, the Tibetan people, the young Tibetans, which was The Necklace of Z. And he also published a series of history books on Shangshung and early Tibetan history called The Light of Kailash. And the spiritual system of Shangshung was called Bun, which was then later Guru Rinpoche or Guru Padmasambhava came and actually brought Tibetan Buddhism to Tibet through the system of Vajrayana, and incorporated a lot of the early Bun practices into the Vajrayana system. So like the practices like song and lungta, hanging of the flags, and these. Now, when it comes to Shangsheng Institute, there's no real connection, because actually Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche was just purely a scholar of early Tibetan culture, and then because of that, and in the name Shangsheng Institute, some people misconstrued and said, oh, he's like a Bön teacher or something, but he was never teaching Bön as a spiritual teacher, only historically and data-wise. He also published a major book, Zhongdun Bön, I think it's called, and this was about all of the early rituals that the Bön people were practicing, the Bön practitioners were practicing. But again, he never taught that to his students, like, formally.
Sure. So just for all our viewers, Bön is, before we know Tibet as it is in modern society, it's the pre-medieval era of Tibet. So just wanted to clarify that. So can I ask you also just if you have, like, what is required in a practitioner of Tibetan medicine, or even someone who's seeking Tibetan medicine, do they have to cultivate Buddhism, or do they have to cultivate a sense of metaphysic? What do you think on that?
Well, according to my teacher, no, they don't have to. And it again goes back to the original thing I mentioned, which is that you can see it purely as a science, you could see it as a spiritual path, or you could see it together, combined. And that together is stronger. But we're living in a world with many different types of religions and spirituality. And as I said, the root of being a good practitioner is having compassion. And compassion is not limited to Buddhism.
Absolutely not.
So, in fact, we could say most religions, it looks like the main point is compassion.
Yeah.
It comes out in different ways, and sometimes in strange ways, we might argue. But
we're not going there. That's going to be a long topic.
But, so, I don't think so. And I think that, especially the programs we're developing now that are trying to adapt to different levels of interest, that definitely it doesn't need to, but you can still learn from the Buddhist philosophy and sort of integrate it also with your own point of view, be a little bit open, right? Like, even if you're Christian or, Muslim or some other religion or atheist, there's still something to learn, without necessarily saying that you're Buddhist. It's not saying you're Buddhist doesn't necessarily even do anything special for anybody necessarily, saying the words, right? So you can still learn something, and it's definitely in the root theory, it's there, the Buddhist philosophy, and so it's helpful to be open, but you can also learn about how nutmeg is the main ingredient in most of our antidepressant type formulas, and that modern research has shown that nutmeg it has an antidepressant and quality and helps people sleep. It's exactly what we say in our text for thousands of years.
Sure. It's great you brought up nutmeg, because I was gonna ask you about drugs, and there's this. I think that's one of the criticisms about Western medicine is their undue reliance on drugs, pharmacology.
Right.
So how does Tibetan medicine address drugs, and what are we prescribing? What medicines are we prescribing?
In general, we always try to work with diet and lifestyle as the first treatment, and also, of course, before that, prevention. And because our motivation isn't necessarily profit-driven, I'm going to go here, we can do that. And one of the problems with the pharmaceutical industry, I think now everybody can agree, it's profit-driven. Absolutely. We all know now.
Absolutely.
And so our whole medical facility is kind of framed around it. It's not to say that all doctors have bad intention and just want to make money off their patients. No, not at all. But there's no money in nutrition and prevention, really, and for the modern world. So now, that said, we have a very sophisticated, herbal system, but because we're working here more in the Western, part of the world, it's a little harder to get all the herbs. Some of the herbs are also, really depleted in the mountains, and there's also contamination, and so you have to source herbs from very pure places. We really try to work with more in a simple way, at least those of us who are newer practitioners of Tibetan medicine and trying to integrate here. We need a sustainable system. Yes. And really, there's just so much you can do to heal through diet and lifestyle. But in the traditional Tibetan medicine, the herbal system is extremely sophisticated. You need to go out and harvest herbs at a very specific time. You need to take a very precise part of the plant and take away very precise parts of the plant to get rid of what we consider mycotoxins. There's just a lot in order to prepare herbs. So it's, at least in the West, we'll see how the whole formulation, pharmacology aspect develops. But I think that, I think of it more as we try to consider it kind of like more a supplement. That's how people
Absolutely.
understand it. They work very differently than Western medicine, and I have a hard time with patients sometimes because of that. Tibetan herbs work slowly with the underlying cause, and you try to bring the health back to balance with them. Okay. And so it takes more time usually for people to see results.
So we're addressing the root of the problem rather than the symptoms.
Exactly. And so we're not trying to kill the symptoms. Maybe in certain cases there's a little bit of this, but usually we do that with therapies, for example, like external treatments. Like massage or hot compresses for pain or different things like that.
Matt, can I just say, by the way, these are just the context of these questions are quite expansive, and in our short talk we're not going to be able to cover everything. Sure. And I thank you for the answers.
Yeah.
So Michael, it seems like. So with Tibetan medicine, there is a greater emphasis on prevention than on just medicating or prescribing drugs, or Tibetan medicine. So would that be accurate?
Absolutely, because our heart is supposed to be very compassionate and pure. So as a practitioner, what do we want most is people to not get sick first.
Absolutely.
So we have a lot of data that's been collected for centuries on how to eat according to circumstances, different types of food, where food is grown, what season when it's harvested, if it's mature enough, how to cook it right. Every single meat, vegetable, oil, grain is analyzed, and then we can fine-tune a diet according to the individual. So we focus on this kind of constitutional health, like how to modify your health according to your constitution.
And could you also talk about how folks are looking for instant results, like you were sharing?
Yeah. So and once people are sick, one of the challenges we have is that because it's a gradual rebuilding your own health through healthy habits, through the herbs we give, treating the cause, it takes time for results in comparison to some of the pharmaceutical drugs we see, which are more focused on the symptom relief, which give instant relief oftentimes, but never treat the root of the problem, and the problem doesn't go away. It just gets pushed under. So it's kind of these two things. And sometimes you can work together with some, like in mental health, for example. Sometimes people need like a tranquilizer or something if they're having an extreme anxiety event, and then slowly with herbs and treatments and massage you can really create more of a lasting result.
Absolutely. And also transitioning to just the community and just a support and framework in Tibetan medicine, at least I think you could speak to in America, and also your experiences overseas. How would you say we are fostering this community? Where do you see yourself in the community, and do you have a responsibility, or do you have a vision or an intention you have within the community, or what would you like to see in society?
Yeah, well, it's a big question, because early on we felt like we were some of the pioneers of being Westerners learning Tibetan medicine. It's very active in India and Tibet. There's really strong, Tibetan medicine institutions. But here we're still quite small, and it's taken a while to see the little signs of growth. And we're really in a pivotal moment right now where we feel, as the first generation of the Western graduates, that we really do need to take responsibility for its growth and find a way for humanity to benefit as much as possible from this precious knowledge, while not changing or modifying or watering it down, which oftentimes happens.
Well, because let me just put a little caveat, because you know how in Western education we have a peer-reviewed system. We have the scientific method where, you know, if there's new information or something new comes out, then we can update or change. So is there like this mechanism where we can keep improving, yet at the same time also preserving?
I love that question.
The ancient tradition.
I love that question because I think about that a lot. Because really in Tibet, the history is that, you know, there was these medical conferences back in the 12th century where they brought together all of the medical traditions of Eastern worlds. You know, the Tibetan people in historically, you know that healing is such an important part because of this emphasis on compassion and love and really also because the health is very important, you know, and even they called the doctor like Laje, which meant like the king of the king, you know. So it was considered a very high position, similar to how doctors are now in the Western world. And they, as a result, they brought together all of the Eastern medicine, all of the medicine available to them. Roman medicine, Indian medicine, Chinese medicine, Mongolian medicine was all synthesized into the early Tibetan medicine, evolution of medicine from the indigenous Shangshung as well. And now I think, well, okay, in a way, Tibetan medicine can still be like this. You know, it has its root theory, and those of us who hold this knowledge should also be very open to learning and synthesizing all of the more modern, knowledge that's coming for health. We shouldn't be closed like, oh, it's just a museum, a tradition sitting somewhere, you know?
Absolutely.
But it needs to be done very carefully. And it's true. There's no great, answer for how it can be reviewed perfectly, but we're working, we're trying to work in collaboration at least with some of the most important Tibetan doctors in the world and some of the more experienced people to make sure that we're doing things well. And we're very careful. We don't want to, change anything, but so I think that's crucial. For example, now food is changing so much. We can't say like, oh, this is, this has this nature, this has this nature. I mean, we can understand through the theory of Tibetan medicine what the situation of modern food is, but the food has now changed. For example, it's not brought to maturity as much anymore. So grains and fruits, they don't let them fully mature. They try to harvest fast, bring them to market quick, let them ripen on the shelves and things like that. And this, of course, we say in Tibetan medicine means that it's less digestible, it's less nutritious, for example, and can cause chronic digestion problems.
Yeah, I was just gonna share that you know how His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says that if science comes out with something, new, then Buddhism has to update itself. So what do you think are the unique challenges as a practitioner of Tibetan medicine in, for it to be more widely accessible? Why are people not engaging with it? So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's an important question, and I've come against it from the beginning of graduating and realizing that I was stepping into a world where pretty much the only people who knew about Tibetan medicine were people who were like Buddhists or had some connection with Tibetan Buddhism or culture. And oftentimes, unfortunately, people hear the word Tibetan medicine and they think it's just some mystical thing. And it's really a rich, deep science itself that also has this influence. And fortunately, people are opening up to the power of mindfulness and wellness, and so it's less mystical now, maybe, and there's a little bit growing acceptance. But that's one of the issues, I think. And I think there's the issue that there's always profit-driven people, and eventually they get their hands on things and take off with it. And so in this modern business world, it's like as soon as you start to become something, and something becomes known, somebody tries to take off, with it and make as much money as possible. Sure. So then we have this issue. And So we have a lot of dynamic things, and in general, the way that I've tried to go about it is to sort of integrate with the more generic wellness world. And that's what my company, Sowa Wellness, we've kind of gone that direction so that we could be in the mainstream right away. So we're working with big companies, we're working with, and just offering, for example, massage without any particular, emphasis on Eastern or Tibetan medicine. Our name is Sowa Wellness, so slowly people learn Sowa means healing. They're run by a Tibetan medicine practitioners. All of these different wellness practices are related to Tibetan medicine. They're not necessarily like our specific way of doing it, but slowly building like an awareness in the mainstream somehow. Then also finding the already existing interested people and really engaging at their level of interest. So that's why we're creating now a self-care program, a less commitment health coaching program that then would build up to the 4-year or more, training in the complete system. So, it's a matter of time. There's not a massive demand right now, and it takes time. We have to get some sort of licensure in established, which is a really difficult, long process. There has to be a real market demand for it. You need a certification body. You need people who are really making sure that there's some level of standard for the practice.
Absolutely.
So many things we need to do, and I think it's just a matter of time. And I'm always an optimist, so I have hope that that Tibetan medicine, while it's been kind of one of the latest to market in terms of as opposed to Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, that we can learn from their mistakes.
Absolutely.
And keep it intact and have become more reputable, but without getting watered down, So I feel like because there's some sort of protection that Tibetan medicine has, and that it's just making it a slow maturation, and that eventually it'll kind of become a well-known science.
Yeah, it's you could draw parallels with Tibetan Buddhism as well, how we were, going back to your teacher, Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, and in Dzogchen, and how the teachings are secretive, and, to an extent. But I'm not trying to take the conversation there. Thanks for sharing that perspective. And yes, there is a healthy dose of skepticism with Eastern medicine and how we incorporate it in our daily lives. How could you talk a little about how folks can access Tibetan medicine easier?
Sure. Well, I would say there's two answers to that. The first one would be, accessing it through finding a practitioner. I think it's really complementary to Western medical practice. So, everybody has their hopefully people have a primary doctor that they go to. Hopefully the primary doctor has a little bit of nutritional knowledge themselves, and they're learning about how to maintain health. But I would say that almost anybody, especially with nagging problems that there's no answer for in Western medicine, that are more small or like minor issues, or digestive problems, or even some mental health and anxiety and insomnia type problems, it's a good idea to look for a Tibetan medicine practitioner. And of course, people could ask me if they want to find somebody good nearby them. There's Tibetan doctors who have come from Tibet who are in major cities around the U.S., around the Bay Area, New York, Chicago. I mean, there's always somebody nearby, and I would definitely recommend, going to them and learning about how to maintain their health or deal with some of these minor issues. And I'm available to help people find somebody. If it's hard to go in to see somebody, there's we do, for example, myself and my business partner will do like online consultations with people over Skype, and if it's a less serious issue they're dealing with, maybe just a little bit of preventative care or something like insomnia, we can coach you online. And then in terms of the education, as I said, we're developing these two programs. One is the self-care program. I really think that this program is going to enlighten a lot of people and kind of really bring to light the direct application that people can find in Tibetan medicine for themselves, and really bring together a lot of the different wellness knowledge they're hearing about: mindfulness, meditation, breathing, yoga, movement, exercise, paleo, keto. Which one do I do? How do I make sense of it? So we're going to really focus on that in the self-care program. That's coming out soon. In the meantime, in the Shangsheng Institute continues to offer the 4-year program, and now online. And so there's a new class starting February 2020. People can apply at tibetanmediциneschool.org. That program is very convenient for people who are seriously interested but can't move to Massachusetts, for example, or have other responsibilities. They can do most of it online, and they just do intensives on site, like a couple weeks a year. So there's many options, and it's really about just realizing what a precious knowledge Tibetan medicine is, and that it really does synthesize all Eastern medicine in one really nice system.
Sure, yeah. Like you were sharing, there's we in today's society, we are so inundated with all these different philosophies, and so it can be really tough to select a certain. I would just argue that it's okay to have it a la carte philosophy where you can borrow the best elements from everything. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Matthew, it was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And thanks for enlightening us on. I myself, being Tibetan, I almost know nothing about Tibetan medicine, so thank you so much. And I love the work you're doing for us and just for society in general. And once again, thanks for tuning into the Higher Land Coffee Talk Show. My name's Nawang, and here's Matthew. Before we cut out, would you like to share any last words?
Sure. Well, I would say to our viewers that life is super busy. And we have so much information being thrown at us through social media. We're so busy. We're always trying to find the best information and the best way to do things, and it's important to slow down and definitely take a look at. Now we're always going towards development, and being our best, and trying to develop, and when we lose sight of the things of the past, for example, that we knew. We lose them every day, and we don't want to let these gems kind of disappear with time. So if you have an interest in the precious knowledge that Tibetan culture offers or other cultures, it's important to take a moment and slow down and learn and be open, because we can really bring this living sciences, knowledge, culture back into the modern world and actually live a more satisfactory and happy life, a more fulfilling life. And that's what, in the end of the day, all we have.
Thanks, sir.
My pleasure.